file so that if you want it for future reference. In addition, I would encourage you that throughout the presentation, as you have questions, to go ahead and ask them in the chat button. We're going to address all the questions at the end of the presentation. And any questions that we haven't been able to address, we will address them in aggregate, meaning that we will send you a full Q&A of both this session and other webinars that we've had with franchisors. We know that it's really important for you to have access to as much information as possible, both about what your peers are thinking and how you should be proceeding on a go-forward basis with SBA loans. So let's go ahead and get started. The question that you are probably asking is whether the new SBA process will actually simplify franchise financing or complicate it. The answer is yes. Today I'm going to cover how the franchise changes in the SBA's standard operating procedure simplified some things, it created uncertainty, and where it shifted risk. I'm also going to show you how the Franchise Registry will make the process as simple as SBA intended it, and how the Franchise Registry mitigates risk to lenders and therefore opens up the lending market to franchisees, and therefore allowed 2017 franchise lending to be a seamless process for you with reduced risk for lenders. So over the next hour, we're going to address what's changed, lender reaction to these changes, franchisor reaction to the changes, and the Franchise Registry solutions. SBA released a new standard operating procedure on December 2nd, which became effective January 1st of 2017. These changes were largely focused on the franchise relationship, and so now it's been called the Franchise SOP. The changes affect both the rules and the process around the unique hurdles that the franchise relationship brings to the lending relationship. SBA has been talking about changes for 2 years, and most of you have been feeling the effects of this conversation because the process of actually getting an SBA approval has been extraordinarily slow. However, even though they've been talking about these changes or making changes for over 2 years, there wasn't much time given for franchisors and the lending community to react because they released it right before the new administration in December. So it's clear that the timing of these changes were designed to be pushed through before the new administration took office. So what I'd like to kind of understand for those of you on the call is how do you feel based on what you know today, and some of you might be coming in with zero knowledge, and that's why you signed up for the webinar. But for those of you who have at least some visibility into the SOP changes, how are you feeling about those changes? So I'm going to wait for, we've got a lot of people on the webinar, so we're going to wait and see how these results come up, and you should be seeing as people answer the changes on your screen. Okay. So it looks like 70% of you are feeling uncertain about these changes, and 10% are negative, and 20% are feeling positive. So there's a lot of variance in terms of how people are feeling about these changes. I really appreciate the feedback that you guys are giving. How many of you have actually reviewed SBA's new standard operating procedure? It's a rather lengthy document, so I understand if you haven't. All right, it looks like the vast majority of you haven't, but 30% have. So, so good for those of you who have taken the time to actually read through the standard operating procedure. Okay. Now I'm sure you're curious. So we're just a subset, but we have been doing other webinars with franchisors. So I think it's always helpful to understand what the broader audience is thinking. So from the last webinar, very similar results. So 57% were feeling uncertain, 8% negative, and 35% positive. And again, similar results to today. 56% had not reviewed it, and 44% had. We asked these same questions of lenders, and at this point, we have had 2,000 lenders participate in our webinars and at various times. And the lending community is feeling equally as uncertain about these changes. Over time, it's been about 60%, and positive ranging from 20 to 30%, and negative ranging from 12 to 21%. So very similar to the franchise audience. And then we asked, how do you think these changes will affect the number of franchise loans you will be able to make? So a lot of uncertainty there, people just not sure, kind of waiting to see two things: how franchisors are going to react, and then secondly, how much is this going to change in terms of cost and timing to them, and how much more risk. So, 30% in our last two webinars were negative, and the highest was of positivity was 20%. So I think it's helpful for folks to understand, before we get into the specific changes, the historical context of SBA and franchising. For those of you who remember the SBA franchise reviews prior to the financial crisis, SBA only looked at a handful of issues that were really focused on what SBA calls franchise affiliation. That's really important to understand, because franchise affiliation is just one thing that SBA has been looking at in the recent history. So franchise affiliation means there are issues in the franchise agreement that SBA determined prevented the franchisee the right to profit or sustain a loss commensurate with their own efforts. So that's the language that's out of the regulation. And at the time, most addendums focused on the transfer issue almost exclusively. There were some other random issues here and there, but mainly it was the transfer issue. Then came the financial crisis, when SBA experienced unprecedented losses in their portfolio. And SBA reviewed all of the defaulted loans, and they noticed a significant number of issues that lenders missed in their loan evaluation. Additionally, this was the first time that SBA saw that franchise affiliation issues, by their interpretation, could affect a franchisee's right to profit. So it was at this time that SBA started expanding their reviews. So more rules came into the franchise affiliation process, review process. SBA started reviewing other documents for other SBA requirements, and they started consistently making determinations on business eligibility. So the most famous of these, probably a lot of you are unaware of this, but in the lending community, this is extremely famous, Sola Salons and Salons BJC, what the industry is known as salon suites. And they were taken off the Franchise Registry in August of 2009 because SBA determined that these businesses were passive businesses. And so these businesses were determined not eligible for SBA financing. SBA then determined in 2010 that they were eligible businesses, and then again determined ineligible in 2014. In 2010, master franchise agreements were also determined to be ineligible for SBA financing because of business eligibility issues, not franchise affiliation issues. They consider master franchising to also be a speculative business, similar to real estate development, and that is what makes them ineligible. So in many ways, the new SOP is going back to pre-recession days. The easiest way to illustrate the differences between the SOP before January 1st and today is to have a side-by-side comparison. So you probably don't know, but SBA puts out an SOP nearly every year for the past 7 years. So they're frequently making changes. And the franchise section has been growing over those past 7 years. But the last SOP that was put into effect in May 1st, 2015 is the last one that we're most familiar with. And what it did for lenders is that they provided lenders with determinations on everything related to hurdles that a franchise uniquely brought to the financing equation in the SBA world. So let's kind of review what SBA did. In 2016, SBA provided lenders with determinations on whether a brand's business was a franchise according to SBA's broad, unique definition. Then SBA also provided determination on business eligibility, and they provided determinations, and they customized franchise affiliation addendums by franchise system and a custom certificate by franchise. And they negotiated streamlined solutions for other documents to meet the SBA requirements. In 2017, SBA has provided a one-size-fits-all franchise affiliation addendum, which means that you won't have to wait for SBA to provide their determination. It's a sign it or don't get financing ultimatum versus a negotiation with franchisors relative to the language to meet their franchise system requirements. So you have a streamlined solution for franchise affiliation, but there have been 3 risks that have been shifted back to lenders in this process, and therefore creating a lot of uncertainty for lenders today. So the first is that SBA has changed their definition of a franchise, and the lender has to determine whether a brand's business meets the FTC guidelines. So this one, while in our world seems very simple and straightforward, it's not to lenders. First of all, they've never heard of the FTC rule before this new SOP came out, similar to probably most of you didn't know what an SOP was before this call. And SBA doesn't actually really understand what the definition, the FTC definition is, because there have been now determinations in the center where they have determined that brands like FedEx, for instance, that isn't a franchise actually should be a franchise. So there's a lot of confusion around what brands meet the FTC definition. The second risk that a lender has is that they have to determine business eligibility. And this is an area where most franchises were held up for the longest period of time because SBA, when they referred Franchise Registry applicants to the Office of Litigation, this is where SBA would pour into franchise business operations manuals. And in one case, a franchisor actually had to change their curriculum because SBA determined it was not eligible. And the third risk is that the lender must identify and negotiate solutions on a one-off basis with franchisors on their other documents. So since the SOP was released in December 2nd, we've been trying to gather feedback from franchisors on how they feel about these SOP changes. So educating franchisors on what these changes are and what it means to them. And we've been asking franchisors, will you sign the addendum without question? Or do you have issues with the addendum? And what issues do you have relative to the entire SOP? And of course, it's a very complicated question because franchising crosses 230 subsectors. So the feedback has been quite diverse. And in addition, we've talked to loan brokers and franchise sales brokers, consultants, attorneys, et cetera, all advisors to the franchisors. And the response thus far is mixed. So we have franchisors, and in fact, we warned the SBA. We actually said to the SBA, we think that a lot of smaller brands might be fine with the new changes, but that larger brands would have problems. And that has, in fact, been the result, is that 50%, I think, of franchisors have actually had the ability to know about these changes, and a lot are still digesting and talking to their attorneys and trying to figure out what to do. So it has been a very mixed response. So for those franchisors who have issues with either the SOP or the addendum specifically, we have been asking for specific feedback because we are gathering all that input, categorizing it, and sharing it with the IFA. And for franchisors who want their voices to be heard, we've been passing those franchisors over to the IFA to have direct conversations with the SBA. I will also say that the SBA has 2 representatives going to the IFA, and it is very important that if you have particular concerns, that you make sure those concerns are voiced to those officials. So what is the initial community reaction? So we have received some positive feedback. So the franchisors who are fine with the addendum have said, this is great, I'll sign it, and I don't have to wait for SBA to provide me with a final approval. And there are less rules. So before there were about 20 rules that franchisors were subjected to, and now there are approximately 9. There have been some unresolved questions. So SBA refers to the FTC rule, that the definition of FTC is what's driving the definition of a franchise. But they don't speak to the exemptions except for gas stations. So they don't talk about the 7 exemptions in the FTC rule, but they do say that gas stations, although they are exempt, are now a part of, they fall under the SBA's rules. And it's unclear on the intent. Was SBA changing this to make some brands that were previously ineligible eligible? So in this case, 7-Eleven, if they agreed to sign the addendum, all of the issues that prevented them from being eligible before are now gone. So just uncertain about the intent. And the number one question that we get asked is whether or not this rule is going to be overturned, like the overtime rule. So let's go into the specific concerns that have been raised by franchisors. If I were to categorize it broadly, the broadest concern is that the new addendum does not give franchisors the ability to provide clarifying comments or the flexibility to negotiate a solution with SBA that they were able to before. So the lack of clarity in the addendum, so the desire to streamline and make it so simple a caveman can do it, is that it took away the ability for franchisors to be clear, and well-written franchise agreements are clear. So specifically, every single point in the addendum has had some negative feedback from franchisors. So we just have a sample set of responses, and we'll be sure to send out the entire document of issues to all webinar attendees. The other major concern is the concern of joint employment. So The SBA has always had a problem with a franchisor controlling its franchisees' employees. However, because it doesn't come up in franchise agreements, there has never been an addendum observed where this language was actually written into an addendum. So now it is in every single addendum. And so we've had some extremely outraged franchisors saying that there is a presumptive link of joint employment written into this addendum. And the franchise agreement is explicit that the franchisee is an independent contractor, and that should be sufficient. So for those of you that have reviewed the addendum, what is your reaction to the one-size-fits-all addendum? Do you have concerns? Do you have no concerns, or you're still not sure yet? Okay, results are pouring in. Seeing those change. All right, we're looking like it might be a tie, 30, 30, 30. Okay, well, this is very interesting. I don't know, 30%. Okay, so it looks like it's pretty evenly distributed in terms of those that have concerns, don't have concerns, and still aren't sure. I appreciate all of your participation. And do you know if other SBA requirements could affect your franchise system? Yes, no, or are you still not sure and digesting or waiting for someone to tell you whether or not they will? Okay, it looks like some of you know that there are other SBA requirements that are going to affect, but the vast majority have no idea and need some further guidance. Okay, great. Well, this is very similar to the other franchisor webinar that we hosted. So I guess there was a lot more franchisors who didn't have a chance to review the addendum or weren't sure yet, but it was pretty evenly split, and most were uncertain about other SBA requirements. Will the franchise registry operated by FranData be going away? This is a question that we've been asked by both lenders and franchisors. And it is, I understand how confusing it is, because there have been some loan brokers who are selling the SBA's change as very wonderful for franchising without really understanding the issues, and have been advertising that there's no more franchise registry. Well, as a franchise system, you have hurdles that you bring to the lending process that are unique and that provide uncertainty and risk to lenders. And the Franchise Registry has always solved these hurdles with you and erased uncertainty and risk to lenders in a very streamlined and cost-effective way. And it will continue to do so. Lenders rely heavily on the information on the Franchise Registry. That is demonstrated not only by the fact that there are 8,000 lenders on the site, and on average there are 15 new lender members a week that join the site, but the fact that lenders were trying to download as much information off the Franchise Registry, we had to stop them and assure them that all the information that is there today will be there tomorrow. Also, we had 400 lenders log in the first 2 days of this year trying to get guidance on these new changes. So the Franchise Registry is not going away. It will all be there the same way it was before, but it is peeling apart the changes in this new SOP to help you and lenders continue to have a streamlined, risk-reduced process. So the best way for us to show you the way that the Franchise Registry removes these unique hurdles is to actually see the lender's side. So unfortunately, as a franchisor, you only get to see your account. And most of these changes that we've made to the lender side, you're not able to yet see because everything changed so very quickly that we haven't been able to change the franchisor side. So what I want to do is show you the main account of your franchise, in this case is Zaxby's, but yours looks very similar in terms of the setup. And on this main account page, you have the business description of your franchise, the NAICS codes, franchising status, and the contact information that you provide that tells the lender who they should contact for each specific purpose. So whenever you're updating your Franchise Registry membership, we ask you, who is the person that the lender should contact for signing SBA documentation? And this is the only person who's the authorized agent. Lenders are very concerned about knowing who is the authorized person to sign. So that's the person who goes on this account. The second is, who is the person at your organization if a lender wants to contact you for setting up a referral relationship. So lenders love franchises because other small businesses only give them one opportunity. As a franchisor, you're opening new units, and so they consider you a referral relationship. Then the third contact is the person who is responsible for answering credit questions. So a common question when Obamacare came out is, how are franchisors dealing with these increased costs? What's the risk issue that the system is facing, and how are you addressing it? So those contacts are very important for the lender to get to the right person. Now, each franchisor has a total of 5 folders of information to help lenders through the lending process, but we're going to focus our time today on the SBA folder. So the first uncertainty and risk that needs to be addressed for lenders is the question, is the business a franchise according to the FTC definition? So simple for us, we live in the FTC land, franchise land, but not simple for lenders. So before, SBA's definition of a franchise was much broader, and it was a 2-part test, use of a trademark and a product or service. Therefore, it included dealers, memberships, distributors, Napa Auto Parts, FedEx. These are not brands that actually fit under the FTC definition. And lenders don't really know the nuance of the 2 definitions. So since we've always categorized business models based on whether they fit the definition of a franchise according to the FTC, we actually flipped the switch for all of brands on the Franchise Registry that have a membership, and lenders know whether your brand, or in the case of those of you on the call who are attorneys, your client's brand, meet the FTC definition. And for those of you that aren't franchises according to the definition, we provide explanatory language describing why you aren't and don't meet the definition of an FTC franchise. For those that aren't, you're exempt from the franchise affiliation addendum. The second uncertainty that you must address for lenders is, will you agree to sign the addendum? So we have received responses from over 150 franchisors who have agreed to sign the addendum. Now, not all of them are agreeing happily. Many are agreeing begrudgingly. And there are many other franchisors who have said no, they absolutely cannot sign it because there's too much risk to their system. And then we've had some franchisors who said, we don't like it, but we'll decide on a case-by-case basis. So, and I know many of you are still digesting the addendum and consulting with your attorneys, but the affiliation section is designed to tell lenders whether you'll sign the addendum, whether you'll sign it with certain conditions met, and when in the process you'll sign it. So there's a natural tension in the lending process. So lenders want the addendum signed the moment they meet your potential borrower, because they want to be certain that this loan is actually eligible. And without that document, there's uncertainty. And of course, you don't want to sign it until there's a signed franchise agreement. So what we want to do is make sure that we tell the lender when you are willing to sign this document, if you are, under what conditions, and if there are other things that you need. So for instance, we've had franchisors tell us they need to make sure that if the franchisee has signed in the individual capacity, but they need to assign the franchise agreement to a corporation before they're willing to sign the franchise affiliation addendum. So all of that explanatory language about the process will be highlighted in the affiliation section. Now, some franchises aren't very particular, and so for those that aren't very particular, we'll outline whatever process that is for that set of brands. SBA has made decisions on brands regarding business eligibility. So a lot of brands that you and I would not think of necessarily as being in question for business eligibility have come up over the years. And this is a considerable risk to lenders because loans that were made to the Curves Tour Women franchisees where they didn't have a signed affidavit saying that there were 2 bathrooms and 2 changing rooms to make sure that Curves Tour Women was not discriminating, those loans were denied. So the lender did not actually get their guarantee paid. So the lender who made the assumption at the beginning that there are 75 to 85% of the guaranteed loan was actually not. So if there has been a business model decision for your brand, or there's additional documentation required, then the document will be added for the brands and the franchisees to sign. So this happens often for brands that market their business to one segment of the population. They're viewed as by SBA as potentially discriminatory, and therefore must assure SBA and lenders that they're not discriminating against other segments of the population. And there are a slew of other business eligibilities that affect franchising. Finally, there are risks relative to other SBA requirements. So there are brands that have comfort letters, subordination agreements, lease agreements, and the like that have been determined not eligible because they don't meet SBA's requirements. And many of these other requirements are focused on credit issues that, for instance, impair the ability of the lender to foreclose. And the franchise affiliation addendum does not address one very large franchisor's lease agreements, which they will not modify for SBA financing for the purchase of real estate unless the franchisee has 5 or more locations. So the message will be communicated to lenders that these lease agreements would not be modified, so that the lender isn't making a loan that they won't get their guarantee. Because in the short term, while that might benefit the franchisor because then the loan gets made, it has a chilling, rippling effect if the lender makes the loan and they don't have the guarantee. Lending to that system will cease. And all of these documents will refer back to previous decisions that have been made over the course of decades by SBA so that lenders have the documentation and the assurances that the guarantee is secure. So, and if there's one thing that I've learned over the course of my last 18 years being involved with franchising and SBA lending, it's that the lender's #1 concern is that SBA guarantee. They would not be making the loan to your franchisee without it. And they want to be 100% certain that that guarantee is not going to be impaired. SBA consistently advises lenders that the paper trail of evidence is the one way to assure their guarantee, and that is what the Franchise Registry provides them. If you ever look, if you have extra time and you want to read the Office of Inspector General's report on one franchise that had a number of loans that defaulted, you'll notice that the OIG was particularly incensed in their report about the lack of documentation and all of the things that the lender ignored throughout the process. So how will lenders know that your account is updated to address all of the SOP changes? There are really three ways. The first way is when a lender has a prospective borrower associated with your brand. They're going to log into the Franchise Registry with their username and password, and they'll search for your brand name, and then they'll go into your SBA folder, and they will see those changes. If those changes haven't been made, it will say unverified on your account. The second way is that over 1,000 lenders have franchise brands in their portfolio. So lenders establish a list of brands who they've lent to in the past and who they regularly lend to or who they want to lend to. We have lenders that have as many as 1,000 brands in their portfolio. That's a little extreme. The average lender has 50 brands in their portfolio. And for every brand in the portfolio, the lender is alerted whenever there is a change on the franchisor's account. So any change to the information displaying on this page will trigger an email. So what does that mean? Any information, whether it's the brand name, the Inc. name, changes in total franchise units, changes in fund score, adding a new bank credit report, a new franchise disclosure document, and finally, and most importantly for this call, changes in the SBA documentation folder. So this includes updates to any piece of information on the SBA tab, including whether you'll sign the franchise affiliation addendum, when in the process, if the business meets the definition of a franchise, business eligibility, and the documents to resolve other SBA requirements. In addition, lenders can customize the notification based on brands within their portfolio and for the site overall. So the default is that lenders are notified of any new franchise that has been added to the site with SBA documentation, or any franchise that has agreed to sign the addendum for the first time. So for instance, if Phillips Seafood, which is a Washington, D.C. landmark restaurant chain who just started franchising, if they decide that they're able to sign the addendum and outline all of the criteria by which they will and get the rest of their documents vetted for other SBA requirements, lenders would be notified even though this brand isn't in their portfolio. So this is really important to lenders, both when they have a deal, because they'll add a brand to their portfolio for the time where they're underwriting the deal to see if anything on the account changes. And then they may take it off because they're moving on to the next deal. But they also use this for business development purposes when they're looking for brands to do business with. And to give you a sense of scale, the Franchise Registry adds on average 1 to 2 new franchise brands a day with new funds numbers on the Franchise Registry. Lenders can also, in addition to the notifications, they're able to also search for franchise brands who have agreed to the addendum and whose business model is eligible for SBA financing. And lenders can further customize the search by putting in other such criteria of franchise units or years franchising, industry, etc. Now some of you might not understand, I've mentioned an acronym before called the FRUNS number. So every franchisor that has been verified as a franchise or not being a franchise that has a distribution model with an agreement to another business entity has a FRUNS number. And this numbering system was adopted by the SBA after there was an investigation by the Office of Inspector General pointing out that the SBA data that it was distributing to lenders was wrong. And not only the coding system was wrong because there were duplicate codes for the same brand. Some brands had 10 codes. But the performance data was misrepresented and underreported by over 25%. So this report really wasn't a thorough vetting, but a cursory vetting of the data. And when we've cleaned up data on behalf of brands, the underreporting has been significantly over 25%. Now, lenders use the funds number to track their portfolio of loans to a franchise system and the amount of inquiries they're getting for financing. So any brand name change or Inc. name change are accurately reflected, but they stay connected to the same funds number. So for instance, if a brand changes their name, an example is an early childhood education franchise out of New Jersey, they changed their name from Rainbow Academy to Lightbridge Academy. Same franchise system, but different brand name. And brand name changes happen for many reasons, including but not limited to trademark issues, the expansion of product offering, market research, etc. So the funds numbering system is the backbone of Fran Data's databases, and it's the only way that lenders can organize and understand franchise brands accurately. So that's why you all have a funds number on your account. Since I've been in this industry, I mentioned earlier that the most important part of SBA financing is certainty around the guarantee. So we asked lenders, given the new requirements, this is a polling total of 2,000 lenders, where are you most concerned regarding your guarantee? Is it incorrectly identifying that a company meets the definition of a franchise? Will the franchisor require additional documentation to clarify the SBA addendum? Is it not satisfying the need to review other documents correctly to resolve any issues related to other SBA requirements? All of the above, and none of the above. And across all of our webinars, the majority of lenders are concerned about all aspects of the changes related to their certainty around their guarantee. Okay, so what should you do now that you have a little better understanding of what the SOP changes are? What are your key takeaways? I think it's first important to really understand that lenders come in all shapes and sizes. So it's very difficult to place broad strokes about SBA lenders. You have SBA lenders that have one person working in the entire SBA department. You have other SBA lenders that outsource all of their back office to a lender service provider, so they don't have a ton of expertise in-house. Then you have other lenders that are essentially big manufacturing facilities where every single group has their own one piece of responsibility in the lending process, so it's like an assembly line. So lenders come in all shapes and sizes. So the takeaway is that lenders are adjusting to these changes in a variety of ways. We have heard from some community banks that there's no way that they can do franchise lending if there isn't an easy list for them to refer and just have instructions of what to do. If they need to add on additional costs or time to the lending process, they're going to be shut out of franchise financing. We've heard from other lenders that they are changing, and they expect increased costs for having to hire attorneys to deal with these other SBA requirements because it's not something they were responsible for. So I think the key takeaway is that you have lots of different lenders who are trying to adjust to these changes in different ways. So what can you do to help lenders adjust to these changes and at the same time increase your appeal to them? So the first thing that you should do is update your Franchise Registry account. So right now, if we have not had a conversation with you, your account says all of the aspects of the SBA requirements are unverified. So you want to have a conversation with your client solutions person that helps them update your account to know whether or not you'll sign the addendum, under what conditions, and fill out whether your business model is eligible and if there's other SBA requirements addressed. We'll also update your contact information to make sure that the document streamlining can occur. We will be adding e-signature capabilities so that the lender can simply send you the document for signature electronically and send it to your franchisee electronically as well. And we've been asked, when do I actually renew my account on the Franchise Registry? So for most of you, you're kind of mid-cycle. You don't come out with a new franchise agreement until March, April, May. So all of this updating of your account is part of your 2016 Franchise Registry membership. So you would renew your membership when your new FDD is ready. So you don't have to wait until your registration is approved in all states, because you could have franchisees looking to get financing on that new FDD in New Jersey while you're waiting for Maryland to approve your FDD. And at that time, we will go through and update your account again based on your new documents. It's also important for you to understand your credit risk perception within the lending community. So your Franchise Registry membership includes access to your franchise credit rating and report. What you're seeing here is Zaxby's, and every single brand that has a credit score and report with 50 units or more has a similar report. For those of you with less than 50 units, there's a different credit assessment because there's not enough experience in order for the brand to be credit rated, but there is a credit assessment that is done and shared with you. And there's other documents that you can provide to the lending community. So I should also mention that the Franchise Registry is not just a site where SBA lenders go. There are alternative lenders and conventional lenders and equipment finance companies that are also on the Franchise Registry. So there are other documents that you can provide to lenders to help them understand your system better. So what we're showing here is Tropical Smoothie, and they had a report done, and they just had a report finished that covers all of their SBA loans. And so they can help the lenders understand the risks just associated with SBA. But they've also provided some further material to help lenders get comfortable with their brand. They understand that if they're growing into a market where the lender's never heard of them, it's helpful for the lender to get a better sense of the brand. And the idea is to really answer all of the questions that a lender might have all in one place. Now, some of you may or may not know that you have access to lender activity that happens on your account. So you can actually view what lenders do. Now, we only track a limited number of activities, and what we will be doing is expanding what you are able to see in terms of what the lender accesses. So right now, you can only see if they go into your SBA account and a few other limited activities. We'll be expanding that. And what that does is it helps you understand the SBA, the lender's process, what information they're accessing when. And so what you choose to do with that information could vary. So in some cases, franchisors will use it to establish new relationships. So in this case, you actually dig into one particular bank and see all of the various people over time who has accessed the information, and you can find out more about them. What's their percentage of loans and franchising, and where did they lend geographically? And then you can contact them if you're growing more in that market. or you might contact them to see if they have any questions about the particular loan they're working on. An additional capability that we will be releasing soon is the ability to search for lenders based on their profile. So it's kind of unfair that we give lenders the ability to search for you based on your profile. So we thought it would only make sense to give you the ability to search for lenders based on their profile. So how much franchise lending they've done, whether they're a preferred lender, and what their geographic footprint is, their industry preference, and their loan size preference. But we'll also be adding what they've actually done. So just because a lender has an average loan size of $350,000 in their portfolio, that may not be what they're trying to do strategically. So we'll put in both what their intentions are and what their actual experience has been. So now that you've had access to more information over this webinar, I'd love to get a pulse of how you feel about the SBA's SOP franchise changes. Okay, starting to get in some results. Okay. All right, well it looks like we have some people have changed from uncertain about how they feel, and 52% are feeling positive, 38% are feeling uncertain, and 8% are feeling negative. Okay, well we have some time to take questions. So I'll open up the chat to answer questions that you have regarding any of the process, any of the SOP changes, the process, or the Franchise Registry. Okay. How do we check and verify what information is displaying in the lender view concerning our franchise? So the only way you can do that is by getting on a call with your client solutions person, so they can actually show you your account as it is viewed by lenders. You're not able to see it from your own account. And then I have another question. Can you review the addendum? So I think what the question is asking is, can we help you go through the addendum and the other SBA requirements to give you feedback? And I think that's what the question is asking. And the answer is absolutely. We will be happy to, well, first of all, we'll give you feedback on what feedback we've heard on the addendum. And then there are franchisors that have other issues that were credit issues that were in their affiliation addendum. Those actually need to be separated out and put into other SBA requirements. And there are other franchisors who would actually address issues. So there's a certain section in the SOP called Special Provisions for Franchises, and these are all credit issues. But some franchisors added those to their affiliation addendum, and those also need to be separated out. And for every franchisor, we're actually just addressing the special provisions. You know, if you're a franchisor and you won't agree ever to those special provisions, we want to set the stage to lenders to make sure that they know that. And for some franchisors, they will agree to 2 or 3, and we'll put that into the other requirements section. May a franchisor ask to amend the addendum if certain provisions create risk for its system? So the answer is no. The SBA, at least at this point, but I will say there is definitely a feeling in the franchise community that a new administration offers a new opportunity. And the IFA, just for reference, has always asked of the SBA that they should advocate, and they have communicated to SBA that they should give franchisors the choice. So right now, the SBA is saying, here, you have to sign this document or don't get financing. Well, franchisors have spent unbelievable amounts of time and money negotiating with SBA to get their documents to meet SBA's requirements. And most franchisors, 1,500 in fact, have a negotiated addendum. So if SBA set their standards to not move at all, and 1,500 franchisors that already have negotiated addendums, if they just gave the ability for those franchisors who do not want to sign this new addendum the choice to sign their existing addendum, and they would just have to certify to the standards that are fixed, then franchisors wouldn't have to go through a yearly review process. And any new franchisor that didn't have a negotiated addendum could either sign this new document or ask for a special review. That still accomplishes the same goal that SBA was trying to accomplish, which is no longer getting in the business. They wanted to get out of the business of reviewing franchise agreements and reduce their resources. That's what was said. I will say it was also a very big political battle internally. So I do know that there are franchisors who are going to the SBA's roundtables at the IFA and asking for just that. Give franchisors the choice. So for any franchisor who's fine with signing the addendum, let them sign it. But for all of those franchisors who had spent the time and money to meet requirements, let them use their existing addendum. Okay, I have another question. If we choose not to sign the addendum, does this mean the lender will not approve the SBA loan? Yes, that's exactly what that means. And we have had some franchisors say they obviously will need another document to deal with the credit risk issues that were embedded in their original affiliation document. And I do know that some franchisors are going to try and provide clarifying comments in that additional addendum that they're going to create to satisfy credit issues and see if that loan will still go through the process and get approved. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Well, we had a lot of questions in our last session, and as a follow-up to this webinar, we will send you a copy of the webinar, the presentation, the issues that franchisors have with the SOP changes and the addendum, and the frequently asked questions that have come up on other webinars. Really appreciate your time today, and we would love to have you rate our presentation. How was this webinar in terms of explaining the SOP changes and how the Franchise Registry will help you navigate these changes? And for those of you who are going to the IFA convention, look forward to seeing and talking with you there.